A single choice to avoid a crowded elevator changed my life forever. Behind a heavy fire door, the man I intended to marry whispered a script that did not include our wedding vows. I walked up those stairs a happy 34-year-old bride, but I walked down as a ghost. My 3-year relationship was a lie, and the truth was colder than the rain-slicked Seattle streets. My name is Clara Vance, and at 34 years old, I believed I had finally engineered a life that was as efficient and flawless as the shipping manifests I managed for Stratus Global. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of a modern Seattle penthouse, watching the relentless rain blur the lights of the Puget Sound into 1,000 shimmering needles. As the lead logistics architect for the firm, I held the master keys to the digital heart of the company. Every illegal shipment, every diverted crate, and every billion-dollar route passed through my algorithms. My professional life was built on cold, hard data, but my personal life felt like a dream I had finally earned. For 3 years, I had shared my world with Julian Thorne. He was a venture capitalist with a smile that could melt the frost off a terminal window and a charm that made me forget the grueling 12-hour shifts I put in at the office. To the world, we were the ultimate power couple of the Pacific Northwest. Julian was the man who had supposedly saved me from the hollow echo of my own ambition. Julian stepped behind me, his hands sliding over my shoulders. He held a small velvet box that seemed to glow under the recessed lighting of the penthouse. "Clara, I wanted to give you this before the crowd consumes us," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. He opened the box to reveal a heavy, vintage heirloom necklace. The gold was worn smooth by time, and the emeralds were the color of deep seawater. It belonged to my grandmother. She always said she wanted it to go to the woman who would finally ground the Thorne family legacy. I turned in his arms, feeling a swell of genuine emotion. Julian. It is absolutely stunning. I do not know what to say. I feel like I do not deserve something with this much history. "You deserve the world," he said, his voice dropping to that low, melodic timbre that always made my heart skip. "You have worked so hard for Stratus. Clara, let tonight be about us, not the shipping manifests." We walked out into the main gala room, where the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the clinking of crystal. My colleagues from Stratus Global were all there, their faces flushed with high-end bourbon and the thrill of being near the center of power. "To the power couple," shouted Sarah, one of my junior analysts, raising her glass. "Julian, thank you for rescuing Clara from her workaholic loneliness." "We thought she was going to marry her server rack until you showed up 3 years ago." The room erupted in laughter and toasts. Julian took center stage, the perfect image of a devoted fiancé. He tapped his glass, and the room fell into a respectful silence. "Thank you all," Julian began, his gaze sweeping over the crowd with practiced ease. "When I met Clara, I saw a woman who could move mountains with a single keystroke. But tonight, I see the woman I am going to marry. This coming summer, we will be standing on a balcony in Tuscany, promising a life of luxury and shared ambition to one another. I promise to protect her as fiercely as she protects the integrity of Stratus Global." As the room cheered, I felt a sudden, sharp prick of unease. It was a brief moment of vertigo, like a glitch in a perfectly coded program. I looked at Julian as he laughed at a joke from my CEO, Mr. Sterling. For a split second, his smile looked static. It looked like something he had practiced in a mirror for hours until the muscles in his face had memorized the exact angle of sincerity. I shook it off, blaming the 2 glasses of vintage champagne I had finished on an empty stomach. The party began to migrate toward the rooftop garden to watch the late-night fog roll in over the water. I reached into my clutch and realized it was lighter than it should be. "Oh, no," I murmured to myself, looking around the emptying lounge. "My phone. I must have left it in the private lounge on the 42nd floor when I was touching up my makeup." Julian was already at the door, gesturing for me to join the group. "Coming, Clara." "Go ahead," I told him, forcing a smile to mask the sudden chill I felt. "I left my phone downstairs. I will catch up with you in 10 minutes." I turned away from the warmth of the party and headed toward the elevators, not knowing that the simple act of forgetting a piece of plastic would be the moment my carefully constructed reality began to shatter. The night air was thick with the scent of rain and expensive tobacco, but inside the hallway of the 42nd floor, the atmosphere was stifling. I reached the elevator bank and pressed the call button, only to see the digital display showing 3 cars stalled on the lower levels, packed with departing guests. The muffled sound of laughter and the clinking of glasses drifted from the rooftop, making me feel strangely claustrophobic. I drifted toward the service corridor, thinking I could snag the freight elevator that the catering staff used. When I reached it, the light was red. The heavy lift was stuck on the ground floor, likely being loaded with crates of empty magnums and silver platters. I felt a sudden, restless urge to move. I needed to clear my head, to shake off the strange vertigo that had seized me when Julian had smiled at the crowd. I pushed open the heavy, reinforced fire door to the stairwell, expecting the silence to be a sanctuary. The stairwell was a brutal contrast to the velvet-lined luxury of the penthouse. It was a vertical tunnel of cold, gray concrete and industrial lighting that hummed with a low, annoying frequency. The air smelled of stale dust and floor wax. As the heavy door hissed shut behind me, the silence was absolute, broken only by the sharp, rhythmic click of my designer heels against the metal treads. I began to descend, the sound echoing up and down the hollow shaft like a heartbeat. By the time I reached the landing of the 40th floor, my breath was coming a little faster. I paused to steady myself, my hand gripping the cold iron railing. Just as I prepared to continue down, the heavy fire door a flight above me groaned on its hinges. I froze. "I am telling you, it is almost over," a voice said. My blood turned to liquid nitrogen. It was a low, melodic timbre I would recognize anywhere. It was Julian, but he was not on the rooftop with the guests. He was here, in the cold heart of the building. "It has taken 3 years," a woman's voice replied. Her tone was sharp and authoritative, like a blade striking stone. "Your patience is finally paying off, but do not get sloppy now." I pulled back into the deepest shadows of the landing, pressing my spine against the rough concrete wall. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, the thudding so loud in my ears I was certain they would hear it. I was the lead logistics architect for one of the most powerful firms in the country. I was trained to analyze data and predict movements, but nothing in my algorithms had prepared me for this. "Sloppy." Julian's voice echoed down the concrete shaft. He sounded different. The warmth, the practiced sincerity that had made me fall for him was completely gone. It was replaced by a flat, terrifyingly cold calculation. I have played this part to perfection. I have spent every single day of the last 3 years making her feel like the center of the universe. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to listen to her talk about shipping manifests and data encryption over dinner? She is a means to an end. "Julian," the woman snapped, "the shield is our only way into the Strata servers without triggering the federal alarms. Once the marriage license is signed, her legal identity is ours." "I know the plan, Elena," Julian said. Then, he let out a sound that made me want to scream. It was a laugh, but it was jagged and cruel, a hollow sound that bounced off the concrete walls like a physical blow. She actually thinks she found her soulmate. She is so blinded by her own pathetic need for affection that she never even questioned why a venture capitalist would be so interested in the minutiae of a logistics firm's back end. I squeezed my eyes shut, my fingers digging into the emerald necklace he had just fastened around my neck. The heavy gold felt like a lead weight, and the stones, which he claimed belonged to his grandmother, now felt like cold, dead eyes. The wedding in Tuscany. It is too much, the woman whispered, though her voice carried perfectly in the silence. It is the perfect distraction, Julian replied. I could hear the smirk in his voice. By the time she realizes the wedding is a funeral for her career, we will be halfway across the Atlantic. I am so ready to be done with this. I am at the end of my rope with the doting fiancé act. I stood there in the dark, a ghost in a silk dress, listening to the man I intended to marry dismantle my entire existence in a concrete stairwell. The champagne was gone, replaced by a bitter, metallic taste of betrayal that burned the back of my throat. Above me, the voices continued, slicing through the sterile air of the stairwell with a casual cruelty that made my skin crawl. I recognized the woman's voice now. It was Elena Vance. She was a senior executive at a rival firm, a woman I had faced across boardroom tables for years. We shared a surname, but nothing else. She was known for her predatory tactics. Yet, I never imagined those tactics involved my own fiancé. So, Elena said, her voice dripping with a cold, professional curiosity. Is the transfer actually ready? We are running out of time before the final shipment clears. It is all set, Julian replied, and I could hear the smirk in his tone. The beauty of the plan is the marriage license. The second we sign those papers, her legal identity becomes a tether. I have already tied her personal accounts to the offshore shells I have been bleeding dry for months. By the time the authorities look at the ledger, every cent of the stolen capital will look like it was moved by her hand. My breath hitched, and I had to clamp my hand over my mouth to keep from sobbing. He wasn't just stealing my heart. He was stealing my very existence. And her credentials? Elena asked. You are sure you have enough? I have been using her master keys for weeks, Julian said with a chilling lack of remorse. Every time she left her laptop open to get us coffee, or while she was sleeping right next to me, I was facilitating the illegal manifests. She never suspected a thing. She is the shield, Elena. She is the perfect, sturdy barrier that keeps the FBI from looking at us while we gut Stratus Global from the inside. The shield, Elena repeated, letting out a sharp, jagged laugh. That is a bit dramatic, even for you, Arthur. Arthur. The name hit me like a physical blow. His name wasn't Julian. My entire life for the last 3 years had been a scripted performance played by a man whose real name I didn't even know. It fits, Julian or Arthur said, his voice hardening. She was the easiest mark I have ever worked. Honestly, her pathetic need for affection made it almost too simple. All I had to do was show up with some flowers and pretend to care about her boring day, and she handed me the keys to the kingdom. She is so desperate to be loved that she is blind to the fact that she is being slaughtered. Well, the slaughter happens the night before the wedding, Elena reminded him. The final shipment clears the federal alarm strip, and the shield gets caught in the blast. You are sure about the exit. The private jet is fueled and waiting, Julian promised. Wait while she is sitting in an interrogation room trying to explain why her digital signature is on $1 billion of contraband. We will be at 30,000 feet, heading for a country with zero extradition. She will be a ghost, and we will be rich. There was a moment of heavy, suffocating silence. Then, I heard the sound of fabric rustling the slide of a silk dress against a tuxedo. It was followed by the unmistakable, wet sound of an intimate, lingering kiss. In the hollow, echoing shaft of the stairwell, the sound was amplified, becoming a visceral, disgusting rhythm that made my stomach turn. I have missed you, Elena whispered, her voice breathy and raw. I am tired of sharing you with her. Just a few more days, my love, Julian murmured. Then we never have to hear the name Clara Vance ever again. The world tilted on its axis. My vision blurred into a kaleidoscope of gray concrete and emerald green light from the necklace. My knees buckled, and I felt myself falling into the abyss of my own life. I lunged forward, my fingers catching the cold, rusted metal of the railing. The sharp sting of the iron against my skin was the only thing that kept me from collapsing into a dead faint. I stood there, gasping for air in the silence that followed as their footsteps retreated back toward the 41st floor. The woman I was 10 minutes ago was dead, the bride-to-be, the lover, the architect. She had been murdered in a stairwell. I gripped the railing until my knuckles turned white. The terrifying reality of my situation finally grounding me. I wasn't going to be their shield. I was going to be their ruin. I descended the concrete stairs with the silent, rhythmic precision of a machine. My mind, usually occupied with complex global shipping routes and terminal wait times, began to process the data I had just overheard at a terrifying speed. Every word from the man I thought was Julian Arthur slotted into a new, dark architecture of my reality. I reached the ground floor, slipped through a heavy maintenance exit, and stepped into the biting Seattle rain. My silk gown felt like a wet shroud. My phone buzzed in my clutch, the screen lighting up with a message from Julian. "Where are you? Honey, people are asking for the bride-to-be." I looked at the words and felt a wave of nausea. Then I turned the device off and vanished into the night. I did not go back to our shared penthouse. Instead, I drove to a nondescript motel on the edge of the city, the kind of place where the neon sign hums too loudly and nobody asks for an identification they actually intend to verify. I checked in under the name Sarah Miller, paying with the emergency cash I always kept in my glove box. Once inside the sterile, dimly lit room, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my mind to the audit. I needed to be cold. I needed to be the logistics architect, not the woman who had just been gutted in a stairwell. It was all a lie. I whispered to the empty room, my voice cracking in the silence. Every single second of it. I began to retrace the last 3 years. The romantic weekend in Napa Valley 2 months ago was not about the wine. It was the 48 hours Julian needed to bypass the biometric lock on my Stratus Global laptop while I was in the shower. The trip to Whistler last winter. He had insisted I take a digital detox, which meant my company phone was left unattended for 3 days. My memory acted like a high-speed scanner, highlighting every moment he had nudged me away from my security protocols. I pulled out my tablet and logged into my personal bank accounts through a secure virtual private network. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the transaction history. There they were. 5 deposits of $999 each, scattered over the last 6 months. They were small enough to fly under the radar of most automated fraud detections, but large enough to look like test payments for a larger bribery scheme. He is building a cage, I murmured, my breath coming in short, jagged bursts. He wants me in a cell for the rest of my life. The betrayal was absolute. It was not just the affair with Elena or the stolen money. It was the calculated attempt to erase my professional soul. They were going to make me the face of a billion-dollar international crime while they vanished with the spoils. I looked down at the 3-carat diamond on my left hand. In the harsh, fluorescent light of the motel room, the stone did not sparkle. It looked like a cold, hard piece of glass. It was not a symbol of a future. It was a shiny handcuff, designed to keep me compliant until the federal authorities arrived at the church. I felt a single tear track down my cheek, but I wiped it away with the back of my hand. I would not give them the satisfaction of my grief. They thought I was the shield, a passive, sturdy thing to be used and discarded. They forgot that a logistics architect does not just build routes. She knows exactly how to jam them. You think I am easy to break, I said to the ghost of Julian in my mind, my voice turning into a low, dangerous growl. I move 10,000 containers across the globe every single day without losing a single one. Let us see how you handle it when I decide to lose you. I stood up and stripped off the ruined silk dress. The wedding was still days away. That gave me exactly 144 hours to dismantle Arthur Finch's life with the same clinical precision he had used on mine. I sat on the edge of the stained motel mattress, the blue light of a burner phone illuminating my face. My hands were finally steady, the shock having crystallized into a cold, hard resolve. I dialed a number I had not called in 5 years, one I had kept buried in the encrypted vault of my memory. Marcus. "It is me," I said when the line clicked open. "Clara." It has been a long time," the voice on the other end replied, raspy and cautious. Marcus was a forensic accountant who had been drummed out of the industry for digging too deep into a senator's offshore holdings. He was a disgraced genius, and right now, he was the only person I could trust. Why are you calling me at 2 a.m? Because the man I am supposed to marry in 72 hours is a phantom," I told him, my voice flat. "I need a digital ghost operation. I need you to find out who Julian Thorne really is, and I need it done yesterday, before I met Marcus in a cramped, windowless office in the industrial district." I had to deal with the weight around my neck. I looked at the vintage emerald necklace Julian had given me. I used a small screwdriver from a travel kit to pry at the clasp. My breath hitched as the metal gave way, revealing a sliver of silicon and a microbattery, a sophisticated keylogger and a GPS tracker. Every room I entered, every password I typed while wearing it, he knew. I hailed a taxi outside a 24-hour diner. I handed the driver a $50 bill and a $20 tip. "Take this necklace. Drive around the city for 3 hours, then leave it on the seat of another cab at the airport," I instructed. By the time the GPS signal was circling the suburbs, I was sitting across from Marcus. The room smelled of old coffee and cooling server racks. Marcus's fingers flew across his keyboard, his eyes reflecting lines of scrolling code. "Julian Thorne does not exist." "Clara," Marcus said, leaning back as a grainy black and white photo appeared on the monitor. "His real name is Arthur Finch. He is a specialist in corporate espionage. He has been a person of interest in 3 different continents, but he always disappears before the handcuffs click." I stared at the screen, my heart turning to lead, and Elena Vance Marcus clicked a few more links. "She is not your rival executive. Her real name is Elena Finch. She is his sister. They have pulled this marriage scam twice before, once in London and once in Zurich. The pattern is always the same. They find a woman with high-level access. Arthur plays the soulmate, and Elena manages the liquidation from the outside. They called me the Shield," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "They are using my digital signature to move the money." "Look at this," Marcus said, pointing to a series of encrypted logs. "I found the digital footprint of the offshore accounts he was setting up in your name. He has been siphoning small amounts for months. But the big one, the final shipment. It is scheduled for the night before your wedding." I leaned in, my eyes scanning the manifests. "The 11th of July, that is Friday night." "Exactly," Marcus replied. "It is a massive move. It is enough to trigger every federal alarm in the country. By the time the FBI raids your office on Saturday morning, you will be the only one left standing in the wreckage." "Where will they be?" I asked. Marcus tapped a final key, bringing up a flight confirmation. "Arthur has already booked a single-way ticket for 2 under the names Thomas and Martha Wayne. They leave at 4 a.m. on Saturday, just as you would be getting ready for your hair appointment. They are heading to a non-extradition territory in the Caribbean." I stared at the screen, the full scope of their cruelty laid bare. They had not just planned to steal from my company. They had planned to watch me go to prison for the rest of my life while they sipped cocktails on a beach using my hard-earned reputation as their getaway car. "Marcus." "Can you mirror his access?" I asked, a predatory calm settling over me. "I want to see every keystroke he makes from now on." "Clara, this is incredibly dangerous," he warned, his voice trembling slightly. "If they catch you..." "They already caught me." "Marcus," I interrupted, my eyes fixed on Arthur Finch's face on the monitor. Now. They are just going to find out what happens when you try to trap a woman who knows exactly how the world moves. I am not going to run. I am going to make sure they never have a place to hide again. I returned to the penthouse at 4 in the morning, the smell of the rain and the motel's stale air still clinging to my skin. I stood before the vanity mirror in our bedroom, staring at the woman I had become. I practiced the smile, pulling the corners of my mouth upward until the expression reached my eyes. It was a lie. I looked like a stranger in a horror movie, a porcelain doll waiting for the clock to strike midnight. When Julian stirred in the bed behind me, I did not flinch. I simply sat at the edge of the mattress and let him reach for my hand. "Clara, you are up early," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep and that false, honeyed warmth. Is everything okay? Just wedding jitters." "Julian," I said, forcing a soft, breathless laugh. "I want everything to be perfect. I was just thinking about the seating charts." I spent the next 2 days living a double life. While I played the part of the devoted, slightly stressed bride, my mind was running 1,000 simulations. I returned to the Stratus Global headquarters under the guise of finishing my final projects before the honeymoon. In the silence of my glass-walled office, I secretly installed a mirrored backdoor into the main server. Every time Julian used my stolen credentials from home, a ghost copy of his keystrokes was sent directly to Marcus and my private tablet. I watched him in real time, a predator unaware that the cage was being built around him. On Wednesday afternoon, Julian came into my home office with a bottle of vintage wine. He looked bolder, his movements filled with a predatory confidence. "Clara, honey, I am working on a special surprise for our first night in Tuscany," he said, leaning over my shoulder. "I need you to help me verify some high-level routing codes, just to ensure the logistics of the gift are handled properly. Can you give me the override for the Alpha 7 manifests?" My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands remained steady on the keyboard. He was asking for the keys to the final shipment. "Of course, Julian," I whispered, my voice trembling just enough to play the part. It is highly confidential, but for you, I suppose it is fine. Here, use these sequences." I typed out a string of characters that looked like the master encryption keys. In reality, they were honeypots, sophisticated digital traps designed to capture data and hold it in an infinite loop. He thought he was siphoning millions. In reality, he was just filling a bucket with digital sand. That evening, I met the CEO of Stratus Global, Mr. Sterling, at a quiet, rain-slicked pier near the shipyard. He looked at me with genuine concern as I laid out the evidence of the Finch siblings' operation. This is monstrous. Clara, Mr. Sterling said, his voice low and shaking with rage. "We need to call the police, right now. We can have them in custody by 9 tonight. "No," I said, gripping the railing as the cold wind whipped my hair. "If you call them now, Elena will vanish. She is the one managing the offshore liquidation. We have to let the play finish. We need them both at the church, where the evidence will be absolute. Please, give me 48 more hours." Sterling hesitated, then nodded slowly. "God help them, Clara. You are more cold-blooded than I thought." I began feeding the beast, allowing Julian to believe his transfers were successful. But as I monitored his latest entries on Thursday night, I found something that made the blood freeze in my veins. Julian was not just framing me. He was opening subfolders in the Stratus legal archives, planting digital breadcrumbs that led directly to my father's retirement fund. My father, a retired judge who had spent 40 years upholding the law, was being turned into a co-conspirator. "He is going after my father," I whispered, the words coming out in a jagged, painful gasp. "He wants to ensure I have no one left to defend me." The betrayal had reached a new level of depravity. Arthur Finch was not just trying to steal money, He was trying to burn my entire legacy to the ground. I closed the laptop, my eyes burning with a cold blue fire. The wedding was less than 24 hours away, and the trap was finally set. I would let him believe he had won until the very moment the ring touched my finger. The atmosphere of the wedding week was suffocating, a thick fog of artificial joy and white lilies that seemed to mock the carnage I was preparing. Julian and I moved through our social obligations like two dancers in a macabre ballet. He was the doting groom, and I was the radiant, slightly frazzled bride. My parents, my friends, and the elite of Seattle were all watching us, celebrating a union that was actually a death sentence for my career. On the Tuesday before the ceremony, I presented Julian with a pre-wedding gift. It was a custom-made, platinum timepiece with a sapphire face, a luxury watch that cost more than most people's annual salary. "It is beautiful, Clara," Julian said, his eyes gleaming with the greed he could no longer hide from me. "I will wear it every day. I wanted you to have something that would always remind you of this moment," I replied, my voice soft and slightly trembling. He did not know that the watch contained a high-definition microphone, broadcasting every word he spoke to a secure server in my motel room. The wedding rehearsal was held at a grand estate on the outskirts of the city. While the wedding planner argued over the height of the floral arches, Julian and Elena slipped away into a private study. I sat on a stone bench outside, a pair of wireless earbuds hidden under my hair. The audio was crystal clear. "We are almost there," Julian's voice crackled through the feed. "The police will be at the church by 2 p.m. on Saturday. I will be out the side door the second the final shipment clears the terminal. She will be standing at the altar in that white dress, waiting for a man who is already at 30,000 feet. And the legal fallout, Elena asked. Devastating, Julian said with a laugh. I have linked her father's accounts too. She will have no money, no father to bail her out, and no way to prove she was not the mastermind. The shield becomes the target. It is perfect. I sat there, the sun warming my skin while my heart turned to a block of ice. I did not cry. Instead, I opened the Stratos Global Manifest on my tablet. With a few keystrokes, I redirected the illegal shipment from the private terminal to a government-controlled warehouse in Tacoma. Julian would see a success notification, but the goods would be sitting in a warehouse monitored by the authorities before the sun went down on Friday. Next, I moved my own assets. Every dollar I had earned in my 15-year career was transferred into a protected trust that Julian's forged marriage documents could never touch. Finally. I sent a single anonymous email to the board of directors at Elena's firm. It contained 3 merger files with internal inconsistencies that would trigger an immediate internal audit. As I walked back into the estate, Julian was waiting for me. He looked at me with a patronizing concern. Clara, you look pale, he said, stepping into my personal space and stroking my cheek. You are acting so strangely lately. Are you having second thoughts? Or is it just that nervous, fragile mind of yours making things up again? I looked into his eyes, seeing the predator behind the mask. I am so overwhelmed. Julian, there is so much to do. I feel like I am losing my grip on everything. Just trust me, honey, he whispered, his voice dripping with venomous comfort. Everything will be over soon. Just keep your head down and let me handle the details. I will, I said, leaning my head against his shoulder. I will trust you completely. The trap was fully set. The stairs where I had first heard the truth had become more than just a memory. They were the symbol of my ascent. I was no longer the woman walking down into the dark. I was the one standing at the top, watching the world I had built for myself grow stronger, while the one they had built for me prepared to collapse. I was no longer the victim. I was the architect of their destruction. The rain in Seattle has a way of sounding like 1,000 tiny hammers, and on the night before my wedding, the rhythm was relentless. We were exactly 24 hours away from the ceremony. Julian sat in my high-backed leather chair in the home office, his silhouette framed by the flickering neon of the city lights and the cold blue glow of my dual monitors. To him, this was the moment of execution. He believed he was hitting the enter key on my career, my freedom, and the entire fortune of Stratus Global. In reality, the house was no longer our sanctuary. In the guest bedroom just 10 feet away, 3 agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation sat in total silence, surrounded by glowing server towers and headsets. Every packet of data Julian sent, every keystroke he made to frame my father, and every forged digital signature was being logged, time-stamped, and mirrored into a federal evidence file. I stepped into the room, my silk robe whispering against the hardwood floor. I reached out and placed my hands on his shoulders, feeling the tension in his muscles. He was vibrating with a dark, manic energy. "You have been at that screen for hours, Julian," I whispered, my voice sounding like the perfect mix of exhaustion and devotion. "Is the surprise? Is it finally ready?" Julian did not even look back at me. His eyes were fixed on the progress bar of the final shipment manifest. Almost, "Honey, I am just ensuring that our future is absolutely secure. This is for us. Everything I am doing tonight is to make sure you never have to work a single day in your life after we leave for Tuscany." I leaned down, pressing my cheek against his, while my eyes darted to the hidden tablet I had tucked under a pile of wedding invitations on the edge of the desk. The screen showed the mirrored feed Marcus had set up. Julian saw a bright green notification that read, "Transfer complete $900 million." He did not know that the screen was a simulation, a beautiful digital lie I had programmed to keep him occupied. The actual $900 million had already been rerouted to a secure government escrow account 3 hours ago. Julian let out a long, jagged breath and reached for his burner phone. He didn't even bother to hide the call from me. He thought I was too broken, too fragile from the wedding stress to understand what I was hearing. "It is done," he said into the phone, his voice dropping that melodic, fiancé warmth. It was Arthur Finch speaking now. "The shield is officially compromised. I have used her master keys to sign off on the contraband manifest. The digital signature is 100% hers. She is ready for the slaughter. Get the jet ready for 4 in the morning. I will meet you at the church for the final act, just to watch the look on her face when the handcuffs click." He hung up and stood, turning to face me with a smile that made my skin crawl. It was the same smile he had used when he proposed, but now I saw the predator behind the teeth. "Why don't we go to the kitchen?" I suggested, my hands finally steady as I pulled away from him. "I think we should have a glass of wine. One last drink before we become one." "A brilliant idea," Julian said, tossing the burner phone onto the desk. We walked into the kitchen, the only sounds being the hum of the refrigerator and the drum of the rain. I poured 2 glasses of an expensive Cabernet, a bottle he had bought to celebrate my promotion a year ago. I handed him his glass and raised mine. "To our future," Julian said, his eyes gleaming with the triumph of a man who thought he had just stolen $1 billion and destroyed a woman's life. I looked him dead in the eye, feeling the weight of the recording devices and the presence of the agents in the next room. I felt a cold, hard stone of satisfaction settle in my chest. "No." "Julian," I replied, my voice chillingly calm. "To the truth." He paused, the glass halfway to his lips. He squinted at me, noticing for the first time that the submissive, stressed bride-to-be was gone. There was a hardness in my eyes, a logistical coldness that he had never seen outside of a boardroom. "Clara, you sound different," he murmured, a flicker of genuine confusion crossing his face. "It is just the jitters." "Julian," I said, giving him a small, tight smile that did not reach my eyes. I am just realizing that after tomorrow, nothing will ever be the same for either of us. He dismissed the comment with a shrug and took a deep swallow of the wine, completely unaware that he had just toasted to his own funeral. The countdown had begun, and the man I was supposed to marry was already a dead man walking. The sun was high over the Seattle outskirts on the morning of my wedding, casting a golden light that mocked the darkness I carried beneath layers of white silk and lace. I stood in the bridal suite, looking at the radiant, 34-year-old woman in the mirror. To anyone else, I was the picture of a happy bride. To the men in the unmarked black vans positioned around the perimeter of the estate, I was the primary witness in a billion-dollar sting operation. I walked toward the groom's suite, my heavy veil trailing behind me like a shroud for the 3 years of lies I had lived. Inside, I knew Julian or Arthur was finalizing his exit strategy. Through the mirrored back door on my tablet, I had watched him attempt to transfer the $900 million from the escrow account into a private crypto wallet. I opened the door quietly. Julian was hunched over his laptop, his face pale and slick with sweat. His fingers were flying across the keys, but the screen was a wall of frozen code. The honeypot trap had finally slammed shut, locking his system and sending a direct signal to the FBI agents in the hallway. What is happening? He hissed to himself, his voice cracking with a frantic, desperate energy. Why is the wallet empty? This is impossible. He tried to force an override, but he was hitting a series of complex logistics protocols that I had designed specifically to trap him in an infinite loop. He was a con man, a specialist in charm and espionage, but he did not understand the architecture of the digital world I had built. He was a mouse in a maze that had no exit. Outside the window, a silver sedan pulled into the gravel driveway. Elena Vance stepped out, a triumphant smile on her face as she looked toward the estate. She expected her own security team to greet her, but the men who stepped forward were not on her payroll. I watched as her face drained of color, her cold, authoritative posture collapsing the moment the federal agents showed their badges. I stepped into the center of the room, my presence finally registering in his peripheral vision, looking for something. Julian. He jumped, nearly knocking over the mahogany desk. He scrambled to slam the laptop shut, but the screen was already broadcasting the federal seizure notice. He looked at me, his eyes darting toward the side exit, but he knew the agents were already there. Clara, darling. You are early, he stammered, his voice trembling as he tried to pull the mask back over his face. I was just fixing a technical issue with our travel funds for Tuscany. I wanted everything to be perfect. I walked toward him, the weight of the emerald necklace around my neck feeling like a trophy rather than a burden. I looked him straight in the eye, seeing the hollow, pathetic man beneath the Arthur Finch persona. The Tuscany flight was for 4 a.m. Arthur, I said, my voice as cold and sharp as a winter morning in the Puget Sound, and the seats were booked for Thomas and Martha Wayne, not us. He froze, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Clara, listen to me. You do not understand. I can explain. It was Elena. She pressured me. I love you. I really do. Stop, I interrupted, my voice rising with a rhythmic, intense power. I reached into the hidden pocket of my gown and pulled out a small remote. I took the stairs. Julian. I heard every word in that stairwell. I heard you call me the shield. I heard you laugh about my pathetic need for affection. Clara, please, we can talk about this, he whispered, his hands shaking as he reached out toward me. No, I said, pressing the button on the remote. I want everyone to hear the wedding vows you actually wrote for me. Through the high-fidelity speakers of the estate's PA system, the recording of the stairwell conversation began to roar over the gardens and the ballroom. Julian's own voice, jagged and cruel, echoed through the halls for all the guests to hear. She is so desperate to be loved that she is blind to the fact that she is being slaughtered. The sound of the elite crowd outside went deathly silent. My father, my friends, and the directors of Stratus Global heard every word of his mockery. Julian fell back against the desk, his mouth opening and closing in a silent scream of realization. You destroyed it, he choked out, his eyes wide with a terrifying shock. You destroyed everything. I did not destroy anything. Arthur, I said, standing tall as the federal agents finally pushed through the door with their weapons drawn. I just took the stairs, and I saw the truth. The wedding march had stopped, replaced by the grating, amplified sound of Julian's own betrayal. Every guest at the estate stood frozen, their champagne glasses halfway to their lips, as the recording of Arthur Finch's jagged laugh filled the air. My father, a man of quiet dignity and law, stood in the front row, his face pale with a shock that quickly sharpened into a judge's cold fury. The grand estate had been transformed from a sanctuary of luxury into a live, high-definition crime scene. Clara. Darling, turn it off, Julian screamed, his voice cracking as he lunged toward me. 2 federal agents moved faster, pinning him against the mahogany desk before he could reach the remote. I can explain everything. It was a role, a misunderstanding. I love you. Clara. Do you love the $900 million you thought you stole? Arthur. Or do you love the fact that you tried to send my father to prison for the rest of his life? I asked, my voice cutting through his frantic babbling like a razor. Elena Vance was led into the groom's suite, her wrists already bound in steel. The high society executive was gone, replaced by a cornered animal with wild eyes. She looked at Julian with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. You pathetic amateur, Elena spat at her brother, her voice trembling with rage. I told you she was smarter than you. You were so busy playing the lover that you forgot who she actually is. I stepped forward, unhooking the heavy emerald necklace and dropping it onto the desk. This necklace was never a gift. It was a GPS tracker and a keylogger. Every time you used it to spy on me, you were feeding the FBI every coordinate and every bribe you moved into those offshore accounts. Every cent of that money has been recovered and tagged as evidence. You did not build a getaway, Arthur. You built a paper trail. The federal agents led Arthur Finch and Elena away in front of the cream of Seattle society. Their faces were captured by the flashes of a dozen phones, their images destined for the front pages of every financial journal in the world. The genetic perfection of their plan had utterly failed because they had underestimated the very woman they thought they were slaughtering. I turned to the guests, standing in my white gown, which no longer felt like a costume. I was not a victim. I was the architect of their downfall. Thank you all for coming, I said, my voice steady and resonant. The wedding is canceled, but the integrity of Stratus Global remains intact. I have protected our company and our families from a billion-dollar collapse. I hope you enjoy the reception. The catering is paid for, and for once, we have something worth celebrating. In the aftermath, I was promoted to Chief Operating Officer of Stratus Global, taking the seat Elena Finch had once dreamed of occupying. I sold the penthouse and donated every single dollar of the proceeds to a foundation for victims of financial abuse. One rain-slicked afternoon, I returned to the gala building where it had all started. I stood before the heavy fire door of the 42nd floor and pushed it open. I took the stairs once more, not because I had to, but because I wanted to remember. The hard way was the only way I had reached the truth. I walked out into the Seattle sunlight, finally free of the masks, my legacy built on my own terms. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and let us know where you are listening from and share your thoughts on Clara's journey. Please subscribe to our channel, Mia Revenge Stories, like this video, and support us by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story of strength and justice.